Have you ever noticed how sometimes efforts to persuade someone to change their beliefs backfire, causing them to adhere even more strongly to their original views? This is known as the Boomerang Effect. It's a fascinating psychological phenomenon where the very act of trying to alter someone's opinion actually reinforces it. For instance, consider a scenario where you're attempting to convince a friend that their favorite political candidate is flawed. Instead of agreeing, they double down on their support. This is the boomerang effect in action. The effect is largely driven by reactance theory, which suggests that individuals have a certain degree of behavioral freedom. When these freedoms are threatened or compromised, they react by doing the opposite of what is expected, thereby asserting their autonomy. It's an intriguing aspect of human behavior that illustrates the complexities of persuasion and the power of personal beliefs. So, the next time you're trying to change someone's mind, be mindful of the boomerang effect. Imagine you're walking down the street and you see a person collapse. Would you stop to help? What if there were other people around? The bystander effect might influence your decision. Welcome to the intriguing world of the bystander effect. This psychological concept suggests that the more people present during an emergency, the less likely it is for any single person to offer assistance. Strange, isn't it? It's a classic paradox of human behavior, and it's primarily driven by the diffusion of responsibility. You see, when we're alone, the responsibility to act falls squarely on our shoulders. But in a crowd, this responsibility gets diffused. We assume that someone else will step up, or we feel less personally obligated to intervene, thinking that there are others who could or should do it. This diffusion of responsibility can lead to tragic outcomes where help is needed but not provided. So the next time you find yourself in such a situation, remember this: don't always assume that someone else will do it. You could be the difference between life and death. Have you ever felt better after taking a sugar pill, thinking it was medicine? That's called the placebo effect. It's a fascinating psychological phenomenon where a person's condition improves not because of any actual treatment, but because they believe they're receiving treatment. This is not merely a trick of the mind, but a powerful testament to the body's ability to heal itself under the influence of positive thinking. The placebo effect is used in clinical trials as a control group to test the effectiveness of new treatments. It's so potent that even knowing you're taking a placebo doesn't necessarily negate its benefits. This effect is not just limited to pills. Sham surgeries, where patients think they've undergone an operation but haven't, can also trigger the placebo effect. It's important to remember that while the placebo effect can aid in recovery, it's not a substitute for real, evidence-based medicine. The placebo effect shows us that our perception can have powerful effects on our physical health. Ever avoided making a decision because you didn't have enough information? That's the ambiguity effect in action. This psychological phenomenon refers to the tendency of individuals to favor known risks over unknown ones. Imagine you're offered two investment opportunities. One has a clear risk and reward profile, while the other is a bit of a mystery. Chances are you'd choose the former, right? That's the ambiguity effect at work. It's a survival mechanism, really. Our brains are wired to protect us from potential harm. And what's more potentially harmful than the unknown? But here's the rub. This preference for certainty can limit our potential for growth. Sometimes the unknown carries with it the possibility of great reward. So next time you're faced with a choice between the known and the unknown, remember the ambiguity effect. Understanding it can help you make more informed and potentially more rewarding decisions. So, uncertainty can often lead us to make safer, but not necessarily better choices. Have you noticed how your performance improves when you know you're being watched? That's the social facilitation effect. This fascinating psychological phenomenon refers to the tendency for people to perform differently when they're in the presence of others compared to when they're alone. Interestingly, the effect of the audience isn't always beneficial. When it comes to simple or well-rehearsed tasks, having an audience can actually enhance your performance. This could be due to an increased level of arousal that stimulates your competitive spirit. However, when it comes to complex tasks or activities that you're not well versed in, the presence of others can be a hindrance. You might feel a heightened sense of pressure, leading to stress and anxiety, which subsequently impairs your performance. This intriguing interplay between performance and social context is a testament to the profound influence of our social environment. So, next time you're performing a task, consider whether an audience will help or hinder you. Ever learned a new word and then suddenly you start hearing it everywhere? That's the frequency illusion. Let's dive into this fascinating psychological phenomenon. It's an odd occurrence where once you notice something, you start to see it everywhere. But it's not that these instances have increased in frequency, they've always been there. You've just become more aware of them. This is because our brains are wired to notice patterns and repetitions. It's a survival mechanism, really. It helps us to identify and remember important information. But sometimes our brains can overdo it. When we learn something new, our brains sort of put a spotlight on it, making it stand out more than it normally would. Hence, you start seeing or hearing it everywhere. So the next time you feel like the universe is conspiring to repeat things to you, remember, it's just your brain being more attentive. So, it's not the universe conspiring to repeat things to you, it's just your brain being more attentive. Ever read a horoscope or a personality test result and felt it described you perfectly? That's the Barnum Effect. Named after the famous showman P.T. Barnum, this psychological phenomenon is all about the power of vague and general statements. You see, when statements are broad enough, they can apply to virtually anyone. Yet our brains have this intriguing tendency to perceive these statements as uniquely applicable to ourselves, making us believe they are insightful and accurate depictions of our personalities. This is why you might find yourself nodding along to a horoscope or a personality test, even when it's filled with generic observations. It's not because the stars have aligned or the test is remarkably insightful, but because the Barnum Effect is at work, tricking us into believing that these broad, unexceptional statements are deeply personal and insightful. So before you swear by your horoscope, remember the Barnum Effect might be at play. Ever noticed how a colour may appear different depending on the colours surrounding it? That's the Bezold Effect. Named after a German professor of meteorology, Wilhelm von Bezold, who discovered it, the Bezold Effect is a colour perception phenomenon that demonstrates how a colour can seem different based on its relationship with adjacent colours. Imagine a red apple sitting next to a green leaf. The red may appear more vibrant, more red, if you will, next to the green compared to if it were next to another red object. This happens because our vision doesn't operate in isolation. It's influenced by surrounding colours, creating a relative perception rather than an absolute one. This effect is not just limited to physical objects, it's widely used in design and art, where colour relationships play a crucial role in evoking emotions and guiding perceptions. So, the next time you're picking out paint colours, remember the Bezold Effect.